Hey guys, big shout out to Classy for that intro. Thanks again, sir. Today we're going to be covering the F-15C. We're going to be working on radar operations. We're going to be working on some of the RWR tones and symbols and how to learn about that stuff. Not so much just me teaching you about it, but where to learn about it because it's a huge, huge undertaking to understand all this stuff. I get it, but hopefully that's why you're here, is you're taking your first steps. We're also going to cover some of the control binding because I know a lot of people don't know where to start. Hey, where do I bind my keys? What do I need to bind? What matters and what doesn't? Do I really need to have flaps right on my joystick? Let's find out. You can see here just the general mission that I have created. It's going to be single player. If you want to follow along and you haven't already, you can generate your own mission, create an F-15C for you, and create on the Russian team some other aircraft, leave them unarmed just for the sake of learning what the radar is doing. You basically want turkeys to shoot, and that'll help you understand, things are coming, things are going, things are turning, things are bigger, things are smaller. We'll get through all that later. I'm going to back out of here, and we're going to go up to settings, and I'm going to come over here and unmute this.
Sound resumed.
And we're going to controls, F-15C. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to run through what's bound on my Thrustmaster Warthog and where I have it bound. And if you just want to make a list as we go on a scratch pad, then that'll be a good way to figure out where you need to bind it if you have something besides a Thrustmaster Warthog. Because obviously you might not have as many buttons as I do, giggity. Or maybe you have more. Maybe you've got a better joystick I've never heard of. Jayhawk says that he is getting his joystick on Thursday so we can play DCS. The hype is real. Good deal, man. All right, so I'm going to start first and foremost with the trigger. The first stage of my trigger does nothing. The second stage of my trigger is weapons fire. That's the space bar by default, and that's when you squeeze the trigger all the way down. The master mode control button is the one you get when you extend your index finger on the Warthog. This button right here, sorry, Steve. This button right here is what I have to select cannon. The keyboard binding is C by default. Next one is the pickle. That's the big red button you fire the bombs or missiles with. On mine, that's weapons release. The keyboard binding is right alt space, and that's what I have bound there. I've got my trimmer hat switch set to the trimmers. Trim nose down is forward, nose up is back, right and left. It's all pretty obvious how the trimmer should work. If not, you can do some reading on your own about how the trimmer works. Just do a Google search. What is trim, or how do you trim an airplane? Would probably be a good way to search that. The TWS button is the lower left hat switch looking button on the top of the joystick there. TWS up is target lock. The keyboard command is enter, and that's obviously when I push that hat switch up. Down is unlock TWS target. That's back on the keyboard, or backspace. Left on the TWS, or the TMS, sorry if I've been messing that up. This is the target management switch. So TMS left is radar, RWS, TWS mode select. And the keyboard by default is right alt L or I. With that font, it's tough to know for sure which, but it's one of those. It's listed under category sensors. Nice, Primus. Let's see. Yeah. The RWS TWS mode. RWS is range while scan. TWS is track while scan. It's just two different modes that have two different displays and some differing levels of target sensitivity. But we'll cover more on that later. The TMS switch to the right, we're still on that same hat switch. And that hat switch, again, is the one directly under the pickle button on the Warthog. TMS right is radar pulse repeat frequency select. That's right shift I. I'm going to go with I on that. And the pulse rate frequency basically is just changing the frequency of the radar pulses. I know that sounds asinine to explain, but as the Doppler effect has, how do I want to word this? The Doppler effect works differently as you're coming and going. Red shift, blue shift with light, trains coming at you, the sound getting higher pitched, getting lower pitched. So that's kind of how the Doppler effect worked, and that's how it relates to the radar. Basically, how is it shifting what the radar sees as to what kind of frequencies you're getting out of the radar. Basically, all you need to know, we'll cover later in terms of what that actually means to you. On the DMS switch, the data management switch, which is just to the right of the one we've been covering and just under the trim switch on the HOTAS Warthog, DMS down, I have set to previous, waypoint, airfield, or target. That's left shift asterisk. It's under the category modes. I have that switch up set to next waypoint. So up and down scrolls through my waypoints or airfields or targets, depending on if I'm in nav mode or ILS mode, or if it was set up to have different targets. DMS left sets me to navigation mode. That's keyboard binding 1, just the number 1. DMS to the right is weapon change. That's keyboard binding delta, D. That's what's going to allow you to cycle between the different types of missiles on the aircraft when you're in a missile engagement mode or a combat mode. Okay, the nose wheel steering button on the A10 is that it's the button that's the pinky on the bottom. It's not the flapper switch that you got to reach out to grab. It's the little button. I have that set to radar on and off, and that's by default is keyboard bound to the I key. The flapper switch right in front of it, however, is set to nose gear maneuvering range. And if you've ever been frustrated trying to taxi the F-15, it's probably because you were not holding the S key while you were doing it. Like I said, that's stock bound to the S key, and you have to hold it anytime you're steering at slow speeds. When you release it, it goes into a low ratio mode, so each input on your feet is less input to the nose wheel, which is good when you're going fast, because a millimeter on your foot when you're going fast could be several degrees of deflection on the nose wheel, and that's when things tip over and you wind up with your wing in the dirt and a fire and Bitch and Betty crying at you and all that fun stuff. I believe the last thing on here is the CMS switch. And forward and aft on the countermeasure switch, which is the little gray one for your thumb on the HOTAS. Forward and aft don't do anything for me. I don't have those bound. I haven't found a need for them yet. Left, countermeasures, flares, dispense. Keyboard binding is delete. Right on that switch is chaff dispense. Countermeasures, the keyboard binding is insert. Insert. Sometimes you've got to put the emphasis on different syllables. Okay, now, because I decided that I wanted to buy a HOTAS Warthog quite a while back, I have a throttle with lots of buttons on it. On the HOTAS Warthog, the little nipple on the front, it's the best way to use, or the best way to describe it, the cursor switch, little mouse switch on there. If you click that in, that brings me to beyond visual range mode. And I found that relevant because I need the cursor to screw up or to mess with the radar cursor. Steve asks if the F-15 has chaff and flare dispense programs like the A-10. I have no reason to doubt that the actual F-15 would not have a program. I don't know one way or the other. That's just speculation on my part. In the sim, it does not have programs. Every time you hit the button to the left, for me, I pop chaff, 2 at a time. Every time I flip it to the right, I get, or excuse me, 2 flares at a time to the left, 1 chaff to the right at a time. Sorbic with the no. Man. Anyway, I was saying the little nipple, when you click that nipple in, it's a button on your Warthog. A lot of times people don't know about it or forget about it, but I think it's really handy because I can click that and it automatically switches over to radar mode for beyond visual range engagement mode. So my radar is trying to look way out ahead of me then. And then I can use that nipple to move the cursor around and adjust the antenna sweep range. You know, am I looking over here? Am I looking over here? Or am I just moving the cursor and looking through everything? We'll get to that later. The coolie hat on the throttle, which is your left index finger. Up is scan zone up. Right is scan zone increase. And sorry, the keyboard binding for scan zone up is right shift semicolon. Okay, coolie hat right is scan zone increase, and that is right control equals. To the left on the coolie hat is right control minus. And what that's doing is that's narrowing or widening the field of search for your radar. As always, we'll cover more on that later. But basically, you're just saying, do I want to look at a little chunk really quickly, or do I want to sweep around and look at everything all the time? I have my personal preferences. I'll discuss that later. Scan zone down is down on the coolie hat. So scan zone up and down, and by the way, this is right shift period for scan zone down. It's under the sensors category. Little demonstration here. You can search by category here now. And then in the 1.5 beta, they've included a search function. So if I'm trying to find scan, I can type scan after selecting that, and everything with scan in the name shows up. Incredibly handy. For all the times that I have faulted DCS for being a pain to work with, their control binding mechanisms and their search and categorization are incredible. After having this and then trying to bind Elite Dangerous or any of the other games that I've been, getting into recently, IL-2 Battle of Stalingrad, absolutely painful to try and remember what button 40 is. But in here, if I'm curious, I press the button and it scrolls right to it. So that's kind of neither here nor there, but it's really nice. Okay, so we've covered the coolie hat. The scan zone up and down are where you're telling the radar to look up higher and look in here or look down here. It's the same way as narrowing the field of view and then setting your focus, except that by default, the F-15's radar is scanning an area in front of you that looks more like this. And you can narrow it and it looks more like this, but you still have to poke that flashlight around the sky to see what you're looking for. What's next? Nothing on there. The air brake switch obviously is bound to my air brakes. That's your left thumb just below the mic switch. Aft for air brake on, keyboard binding left shift bravo. This can be very handy. Forward on me for left control bravo, keyboard binding, and that's air brake off, air brake stow, whatever. If for some reason you want a partial air brake deployment in whatever direction the air brake is traveling, you can hit that direction again. So for example, if I pulled it aft and it started to deploy and I pulled it aft again, it would stop right there. And then if I hit aft again, it would continue. So repeating the previous commands freezes the air brake in whatever position you set it in. It doesn't deploy like the A10 where you have to hold it. It just keeps moving as soon as you click it back, and it keeps moving when you click it forward. But you can stop it in the middle, which is something some people haven't known before. The boat switch, forward and aft, are just below the air brake switch on the HOTAS throttle. Aft brings up close air combat vertical scan mode, which tells the radar that I want to look in a really narrow beam in front of me to up. And it scans up, I don't know how many degrees, I don't remember, and I apologize for that. But basically, it puts like a knife, like a fan, I guess not a knife, but a fan of radar coverage, just like this, right off the nose of the jet, sticking out from my pinky and looking up. So if I roll and something passes through when the radar happens to be zooming back and forth and it catches it, that's what it'll be. Sometimes you'll see people enter the VSS, the vertical scan mode, and roll slowly if they've lost the target, but they know they're inside 10 miles. And if they roll in the direction they think he went and then scan across it slowly, the radar is going to be doing this, and he might catch him. The bore mode tells the radar to focus all the energy in the front and look for things out there. And whatever it finds, the closest, biggest target, it locks onto that. But it's just looking straight ahead in a cone instead of a fan or a needle. It's I guess it's more like a needle, but it's just like a cone of energy beaming out. Narrow beam on your flashlight. That's where you're looking. And if you use that flashlight in the dark metaphor for the radar, it kind of will help you picture what's going on because the divergence of the flashlight beam kind of helps explain why, using it as a metaphor, it explains why you can't see things that are a certain distance away if they're too small or if they're against the wrong background. Um, so that's a good way to help you picture it in your head and help you understand what you're looking at and what you're looking for and how you're going to scan with that flashlight. Where are you going to point it to find someone in the dark? Okay, moving farther down the China hat aft, I have to display zoom in, and that's keyboard equals, and that decreases the radar range that is displayed on the radar screen. It does not decrease the range that the radar is scanning to. It's just like a flashlight. If you turn a flashlight on, someone 100 miles away might, if you have a bright enough flashlight, be able to see that. Obviously, I'm being facetious with that, but you can still see the flashlight, even if the flashlight can't see you. The guy holding the flashlight might not see you seeing him, but you're pointing that bright light out in the dark. People know where it is, and that's why the RWR comes into play. Forward on that, obviously, is the opposite. Display zoom out. It increases the range of the display so that you can see things that are farther out, even if the radar can't see things out that far. We'll talk about that when we get to big versus little targets and ground clutter and all that. The cage, uncage, the red button on the left throttle on the forward side, I have set as an alternate shift key. You can do that under that's a modifier. My bad. Down here on the bottom left, and let me verify that you guys can see my mouse here. Yes, you can. All right. On the modifiers here, you can come over and add, with this key right here, a modifier on your joystick. And it's just the same thing as holding a shift key in terms of what the controls do. You hit shift and now I does something else than what it does normally. I normally, I think, just turns the radar on and off. Shift I does something with the RWS TWS, if I remember from earlier. So I have a modifier set on there that changes what some of my buttons do just to add a little more functionality. I almost never use the shifted functions. It's only like screenshot type things or secondary functions. For the actual flying and fighting the F-15, the buttons that I'm going to go through without hitting that shift key are the ones we're going to worry about for now. Anyway, that's how you do it. On the pinky switch, the toggle switch on the side, 3-position, I have aft set to navigation lights, and it doesn't hold them the same way the A10 does. So if I switch it aft, they're on, and if I switch it center, they're off. You have to hit aft and back to center, and then if you want to turn them off, you hit aft and back to center again. Forward on that is the cockpit illumination. That's really handy to be able to see what's inside, and then also to be able to flick your lights for someone outside if they're having trouble finding you in the dark or whenever. What else here? A good one to memorize in the new beta, just because it looks really cool, is right control, right alt, Lima. And what that does is turn on the red strobes on the jet. Before, when you turned on the landing lights, you'd have red lights just turn on and stay on, and now it's the strobes. Those could also help you with being identified from farther away or being seen close to the runway. A lot of guys like to shit on being seen near the runway. Ecoke, thank you for the host, sir. I like having all the lights on when I'm near the runway, just because that's another chance for someone to see my jet coming into land or going to take off. That's just me. Okay, that covers everything directly on the throttle and stick. And the HOTAS also has switches down here on the bottom, as most of you know. I have the, we'll start at the top, or the forward, and work aft here. The fuel override switch and then the fuel norm override switches for left, I have bound to the rearming and refueling window. I can just flip that and it pops up with my rearm refuel. I can go through and select my weapons and fueling, and then I'm done. It's just It's really just a time saver when you're on the ground. The one to the right of that, the flow right norm override switch, I have set to jettison fuel tanks, which is left alt Romeo. Kintolav, thank you for the host, sir. When when you flip that, it only punches the fuel tanks. You can hit, I believe it's left control W to punch the fuel tanks. I believe it's outer than inner. And then lastly, the stores, starting at the outside and working in. I don't have that bound to anything. It's just a keyboard binding that I've remembered. And I've got my keyboard over here on the right, so I can put my right thumb on the, yeah, put my right thumb on the control switch and then tap that W key a bunch if I need to punch the stores to get the weight off the jet, if I'm retardedly low on fuel and trying to get altitude and reduce drag and see if I can glide home. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot of reason to punch stores. What else did I have? The normal switch, the two switches after that, there's a momentary switch to toggle forward and just a toggle to the aft motor position. If I hit the engine operation left switch, that's my left engine start. And the right switch is my right engine start. That's left alt home and left control home, respectively. Aft on both those switches, I don't have bound to anything. The APU start switch, I have bound to left control C as the default keyboard binding for canopy open and close. Another one that's just a shortcut. It's not the end of the world if you don't have to do that. One that's very important to have bound, because it's a pain to try and reach over for your keyboard, is to hit the, I have the landing gear warning button configured to landing gear, which is the keyboard G, in pretty much every jet that I fly or aircraft that I fly. Anytime I can, I have that one button bound to landing gear toggle. And that just makes life retardedly easier because I can reach down at a muscle memory and hit that button and never have to look up. My arm just knows right where to go. The flap switches on the left side outboard of the throttle. Flaps up, left control foxtrot. Flaps down is left shift foxtrot. Find those how they're appropriate. It's good for landing. There are a few applications where it can be helpful in a dogfight if you've gotten that slow. God help you. But we're not worried so much about the dogfighting right now. The EAC switch is aft left on the panel here. I have that set to refueling boom, which doesn't seem like the right. It should be refueling door, but that's just a personal gripe. Left control Romeo is the keyboard binding, and that's what opens up the little flapper on the left side wing root that allows you to refuel the aircraft. The radar altimeter switch I have bound to takeoff trim. I don't often use that because chances are I'm going to trim the jet to fly pretty normally when I'm coming in to land. And when you go to take off, the jet should be generally in takeoff trim configuration. I mean, if you've happened to hold the trim on accident, may the force be with you. I have the autopilot engage disengage function set to autopilot disengage, which is left alt 9 on the keyboard. I have the attitude hold function for autopilot configured to the LASTE laced switch set to path. Path and attitude coincide there on mine. The keyboard binding is A, and I have altitude hold switched to aft there. And I have the Thrustmaster HOTAS Warthog, Kentolav. I'm mostly just trying to go through this to let you know the things that I have found important. The stuff that's on the stick and the stuff that's directly on the throttle are the most important things to have bound. Beyond that, it's just kind of time-saving tips here and there. Let's see. If you have the availability, you can come up here for axis commands. You can set the radar horizontal and radar vertical to rotaries, and that will allow you to dial where you want the radar to look quickly. The way I have it set up, it doesn't work that way. Not the same way. The TDC slew. That's the cursor on the radar screen in the bottom left when you're flying along, and that little, it's two brackets that move around. Moving those two brackets is the TDC slew. And I've got that set to that little nipple cursor on the HOTAS Warthog. If you've got a cursor of some kind on your joystick, that's what I would set it to, personally. Obviously, you could just use the button version of that in the other commands. The F-15 does have the ability to set wheel brakes to the axis. Please find those for your own sake. Obviously, if you have them. If not, there is a brake command to bind elsewhere. Let's just see here. I want to go to search TDC. Oh, that's not. Let's do sensors category. Why am I not finding this? Target designator is the name of the cursor slew when you are not in the axis control mode. I don't know why they have the name differently, but target designator, I guess that's probably what it is, TDC. Target designator cursor is the two brackets on the radar screen. To move those with just a button or like a hat switch, you would use period, comma, backslash, and semicolon. The other one here, and okay, there is one function that I had the shift function that I mentioned before, or the modifiers function. I have modifying the button 15, which is that little red button on the throttle, and then TWS, which is my target lock unlock switch on the joystick. I have, the modifier function down on TWS to radar return to search. So that way I don't have to put the cursor over a specific target and then hit down to unlock. If I hit that and then hit down, it unlocks all the targets on the radar at once. So that can be helpful. Controller. All right, thanks, Ultraman. Good looking out. RWR SPL mode select. I've never smurfed with the RWR SPL mode, but I do have it configured as a shift function. The RWR volumes, as just a matter of personal opinion, really bother me in the F-15. It's just way too loud for the number of beeps you're listening to. And so I have it configured so I can hold that same modifier key again, that red button on the Warthog, and then down on the DMS to turn the volume down. I think you hit it like 10 times and it turns the volume off, or somewhere in that neighborhood. If you tap it up once, then you get just a little volume, and generally that's enough. That's more than enough for me. That's another one that'll help save your sanity when you go to fly. If you're just flying along in a busy mission and you hear all the time, all the time. And then you've got that friendly who's behind you who hard locks you and just cruises. And you just want to jump up out of your seat and hop in your car and find that guy and punch him in the throat. Or gal. I'm not going to discriminate. Could be gals out there too. Let's hope. I believe that does cover everything that you need to worry about binding. On the Warthog, I have the friction lever, which isn't really a lever, it's a sensor, or it's an axis. I have that bound to my view zoom. Just a matter of personal opinion. I can zoom in a little bit, zoom in a lot, really easy. The only downside is that the sensor in that particular part of the Warthog isn't all that great, and it jitters in certain positions. Starcat, you're probably entirely too correct. That covers F-15 controls, near as I can tell. Like I said, that's pretty much everything. So I'm going to go now into my mission editor. Looking back at this mission that I set up, I selected a couple big jets, little aircraft. The throttle on this is outstanding, Preston. Unless something better comes out, I will not stop saying that the Warthog is the joystick throttle combo to have. It's Absolutely outstanding. The fidelity and the solid feel. I'm never worried about feeling like I'm going to break this thing, and that's outstanding. Yes, they can have failures, but anyway, are the servers working? Um, Honestly, I haven't looked. I haven't tried to go online yet today. I have created this mission. I'm going to fly it from my end. You guys can watch, listen. If you've taken the time to create a mission earlier, you can follow along on your own. Um, we'll go through that stuff, and then I was going to hop in the 104th later and go through some stuff there, just some practical application. Hey, let's try it for real, sort of thing. And yeah, but like I said, I created these tracks. There's a larger A50 flying around, an AWACS, so he'll show up on my RWR. There's some other aircraft flying around. I got some little guys flying down low. Got some 29s flying mid-range. I've got a MiG-31 flying up in the Codosphere, and that'll give me a chance to move my radar around and show you how I'm looking for all the different people. And that's the reason that I set up so many different targets at different altitudes and aspect ratios. And we'll go from there. Baileys. I couldn't resist, Lamb. I couldn't resist. Okay, I'm going to select my F-15, and then I'm going to sit and wait for a second. Hey, we're in. All right. You'll find if you've been in here, TWB Insider. Huh, I'm not sure what he's getting at. You'll find if you've sat in the F-15 before that, hey, there's no electronics running. That's kind of a pain in the dick. Or vag. Just going to keep being hopeful. The cure to that is right shift L. Matter of personal preference. I grab that modifier, DMS down about 10 times. Sometimes I just spam it for a while. Then I hit right shift Lima. And then if I'm in a mission with a whole bunch of radar stuff, this thing doesn't immediately freak the Smurf out and get real pissed, make a lot of noise, and then I'm already grumpy. In this instance, my aircraft is already armed, but this is when I would hit my left engine fuel switch to bring this up. I actually am going to modify my loadout. I pretty much always take 90 flares and 60 chaff. The reason for that is the flares dispense 2 at a time, and Russian aircraft like their heaters. So I want to be able to punch a lot of heat out of my aircraft to distract and deflect those missiles. And the chaff dispenses 1 at a time. So I got 60 presses on the chaff, but even setting this to 90, now I've only got 45 presses of the flare. Anyway, before it was much worse. You've only got a handful, and then you're SOL. I'm gonna leave my fuel set at 100, almost always departing with 100% internal fuel. I prefer the 2 bags set up on the F-15. It's just a matter of personal preference. 3 bags is really heavy and really draggy, and if you're not planning on going slow for a long time, the 3rd bag is almost more trouble than it's worth, in my opinion. Um, Also, the way the area theory gets smurfed with, I believe they have tried to model that now. So when you get into the transonic or the at least the critical Mach ranges, that 3rd bag is really going to screw with you, as opposed to just having 2. I run 6 120s and 2 heaters as my oh shit I'm in a knife fight sort of weapons. Um, I run the 120 Charlies as everyone should. The Bravos, if you're really into that, go for it. Um, if you want to know more about the missiles, IS Getka, and I'm going to type his name right here, is the guy to talk to. If you want to know about BFM, IS Getka is the guy to talk to. I believe he's running a clinic. He does charge for it, but he will do one-on-one instruction and make you very, very proficient at basic fighter maneuvers in the F-15. He's doing a lot of work right now on the missiles. just independently, from what I know. He had been working with some other people to try and offer some improvements here and there, but it's something he's very fascinated by, something he wants to work in the industry for, actual missile design and development. So that shows you some of the passion he has for getting that stuff done. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and set this going.
Request rearming.
The differences between the 120B and C are in the motor, the seeker head, and the fins. The fins are clipped because it was designed to be carried inside the F-22's internal bay on the C model. The B model still has the bigger fins. The seeker head, theoretically, and SCAT would be the guy, ISCATGA, would be the guy to find out more on how it's modeled. But theoretically, the seeker head is much better for countermeasures in terms of electronic active and passive with chaff rejection. So these are all these false flags flashing in my face. Which one is the real thing? Well, the C should be better at picking the real one each time. And then the C's engine should be better about smoke trail generation and thrust profile. Like I said, ISGAGA is the guy to ask about that stuff. If you see him and you want to learn about it, tell him that. Just say, hey, I want to learn more about this stuff. And especially if you're willing to pay, he's your guy. He does accept bribes in that regard. There you go, Preston. Good stuff. Once my stores are configured, and I can verify here, flares at 90, chaff at 60. I've got 940 rounds of gun. Let me do this. Now you can see my cursor. These are the weapons on the pylons, the 120s, 9s, 120s. Fuels listed across the top, fuel on each side. This stuff is all just kind of for show right now. And we should be set. My total internal fuel is 21,600 pounds. These are my internal sump tanks. Those are the ones that feed the engines. You'll notice this one carries less. This one will run out first. After you hear bingo fuel, you definitely need to be heading home. In the beta, another key that's good to memorize that I don't have set to anything, left alt delta. We'll watch down here. See this little caret on the top or at 3,000 pounds? Well, I want my bingo fuel indicator to set off at 6,000. So I'm going to hold left alt delta until it gets there. And now suddenly when I get to 6,000 pounds, Bitch and Betty's going to say bingo fuel. And I'm going to know, hey, I've got plenty of gas to get home, but I need to start heading that way right now. And that'll still give you some leeway also. If you hear bingo at 6,000, you've still got a little bit of burner use to try and get away from the fight. If you hear bingo at 3,000, you need to cancel the burner, but then you can't really run from anything. So yeah, good reminder to set that at half a tank, basically, 6,000 pounds internal. That's pretty much it. I hit my left engine start button, and off she goes. And I like to cheat, and I immediately hit my right engine start button when the left engine has rolled over 1%. And I can start both engines simultaneously. I'm going to lower the cockpit so it's not so noisy. I hit the M key to activate my mirrors because they're pretty sexy now. Right control, right alt Lima to turn on my flashing strobe lights there. And I'm going to hit aft on my pinky switch on the Warthog to get those lights. And that's it. I'm going to hit right alt L twice, and that's going to turn on my nose landing light. That's another good way to do it, Preston. I hadn't thought to use it that way, but that looks like some pretty good employment. I'm going to taxi out here. I'm going slow. I'm holding the paddle down right now. My right pinky is on the paddle. And I'm using gentle control inputs with my feet on the rudder to steer. Then when I get lined up, I release the paddle right now. And now I can still steer with the nose wheel, but it's more refined. It's much gentler. And I'm advancing my throttles to afterburner, and off we go. I can confirm my afterburner position by looking at the nozzle position. 0 should be no burner, or close to 0. And then there's 5 increments in between. 100% open is full afterburner. You can also double check with your fuel flow, which as you can see is astronomical in pounds per hour per engine. I'm well over 105,000 pounds per hour per engine right now. Fuel burn increases with speed because you're shoving more air into the engine, so it needs more fuel. Your speed up to about Mach 0.9, and you can see now I've entered gun mode just to demonstrate here. This is the Mach number. When your speed is Mach 0.9, that's about the max power you can get out of the engines. So if you want to climbing around Mach 0.9 is about the best place to do it. So you can pitch to maintain Mach 0.9 at full afterburner, and that should theoretically give you just about your best rate of climb. Flying along. Okay, I'm going to turn up my RWR volume now. And for me, that's the modifier key and DMS up. Now, every time that radar from the A50 sweeps me, I get a chirp. Sorry, I was getting a phone call there. That'll have to wait a little bit. Hey, Rough Rider. Alright. We'll level off around 25,000 feet. In terms of F-15 employment, it's useful to know when you're going to start contrailing, because your contrailing is a visual indicator of where you're at. Otherwise, you're just, you know, a speck out there. There's a chance they might see you, but there's a good chance they won't. However, when you punch up here to contrail altitude, you start leaving this big trail of frozen moisture behind you. And that's not so helpful with staying hidden. But since they're not shooting at me, I'm just going to contrail along because it's shiny now. ED did a really good job with this graphic, in my opinion. It's going to be noisy here in just a second. We're supersonic. Told ya. Okay. Yep. Ultra is exactly right. You can see this trail from the edge of visual range, basically. Take it easy, Eco. Catch you next time. Voicemail. Check that here in a while. All right, so I'm going to use my mouse cursor on the throttle now. I'm going to click it in, and that sets me to BVR engagement mode. You'll notice the circle pops up. Big circle around the outside there. If I use my right pinky, that turns my radar on. Now you can see that the cursor is sweeping left to right, so it's scanning the full range, left to right. And you've got this dot with two dots with two numbers. Up on top, you can see here, 20 nautical miles. The cursor is currently centered in the full scale. It's halfway, so that's 10 miles out. So at 10 miles out, I am scanning from full left deflection to full right deflection, from 27,000 feet to 38,000 feet. That's the slice of sky that I'm looking at where the cursor is. If I move the cursor, that scale on the side there increases because the flashlight beam is diverging the farther away you get. So The closer I move that cursor, the smaller those get. When you get really close to people in BVR mode, it's really hard to find them. So it's best to keep an idea where they are in your head and then start looking for them outside the cockpit when you get close, if there's a lot of targets. If they're that close and there's a lot of targets, you probably should have turned around and gotten farther away and thrown some more AMRAAMs to weed them out for a while. If that's not an option, let's hope you've got some friends around. Otherwise, you're in a turn fight, and those often don't end so well. Okay, so I'm going to use my China hat forward now, which is going to be my scan zone, or scan range. I don't remember what the proper term is for it, but it's going to increase or decrease the range that my display is showing. Again, this is not changing how far out the radar is seeing, it's changing how far out the scope is displaying. So the radar beam is still going way out there. That A50, if I set this right about here-ish, I know that A50, because I built the mission, is right around 15,000 feet. So I set this right about here. I know that that flashlight's going to cross him in that range. You can see the farther out it gets, the bigger those get. If you move the cursor all the way to the top or the bottom, your range automatically shifts. You'll notice it jumped to 160 nautical miles. This jumps, if you move the cursor down, it continues to jump down in range there. You can manually do that with that. Yeah, Preston, high and medium is the pulse rate frequency. Currently, it's in an alternating scan mode. So what this is doing, you'll see this caret right here. So there's top, high middle, low middle, bottom. Top, high middle, low middle, bottom. It's basically cutting what the flashlight is looking at into 4 sections, and then it's scanning back and forth across them. So this little caret jumping across the bottom is telling you where the radar is looking left and right, and the caret on the side is telling you which chunk vertically that it's sweeping across, because it's always scanning like this. The high and medium function, you can set it to high, and high is optimized for targets coming at you. High, generally, unless they're very close, does not see targets going away from you. Medium, however, does see targets going away from you. If you're headed into an engagement zone, and you've got threat contacts on here, that means they're looking towards you. So you want to point towards them and be in high mode, because you know that you're coming head-to-head. If you come towards the merge and you see the target turn and then drops off your radar, you could switch to low, or sorry, not low, to medium mode. So then I would double-click TMS right again to get back to high there. If I'm on high and I've got a target coming at me and then it vanishes, see, I'm still out of range for most of these targets here. There we go. I punch my tanks. I'm below 13,400 pounds in total fuel, and because of that, I know that my external tanks are dry. You can also just quickly notice if this is moved off 12,000 pounds, your external tanks are definitely dry. And somewhere around here, I should start seeing some smaller aircraft, so I'm going to get a little lower now and start looking for them. The F-15's radar ability to scan down can be limited at times. Also, the radar's line of sight. If the target goes behind something, there's a good chance you're going to lose it. If it just blips behind a building, the radar is going to just kind of ghost over that and keep looking where it thinks it's going to go, and when it pops out, it'll see it. Oh, hey, here's a target. Because I want a faster update, and I'm still in range while scan mode, I'm going to decrease that. So now I know he's at 10 miles, and he just dropped off my radar here. Where did this target go? Well, I'm going to switch to medium scan now. And maybe there's something, maybe there's not. Oh, there's something. Now I go to TWS mode. I'm in medium PRF, and that stays. Okay, he's still coming at me, but he's close enough that I can see him in medium mode. And now, in this TWS mode, track well scan, I get a heading bug and an altitude assigned to that bandit. So this is the best way to keep SA on multiple targets, but keep in mind TWS mode gives you a narrow scan beam. So you'll see that those two dots on the bottom are very close together now. So I kind of lost this guy here. Let's see if I can pick him back up. Yep. I entered VSS mode and then scanned to the left because I know he was left of my center line, and there he is. Now, if you lock someone in VSS mode, it's a slang term that we use is hard lock. And that means that the radar is focusing all of its energy to radiate that target and stay locked onto it. And so in his cockpit, if this was not a P-51, he would be hearing right now his RWR freaking the Smurf out. Obviously, P-51 doesn't have an RWR. So I'm in VSS mode. I've lost lock, but I know he's up there, and now it crosses, and he can see it again. I can hit right on DMS and switch to my Sidewinders, and because the radar is pointed at it, the Sidewinder cursor, or the seeker head, automatically slews to what the radar is looking at, and I get tone. Alternatively, I could be in bore sight mode and point the nose at him, and go back to Sidewinders, and now I've got tone. If I turn the radar off, I can only get tone when I point the Sidewinder right at him. Otherwise, it stays directly ahead. Ike asks if you have to, or does it auto-lock in VSS? In vertical scan sweep, yes. Whatever crosses in front of you, the first item that it sees and can identify as a flying object, it locks onto. It doesn't care if it's a friendly or not. So it's important to keep an eye when you do get a lock. Look around the edges of your HUD and verify that there's no X in the middle of that box. Starcat talking about battle ratings. Ermagerd. Alright. Well, we're going to leave the poor little P-51 alone now. I am going to re-enter BVR mode. I clicked my cursor inwards. I now turn the radar back on. You'll notice now that I've been in VSS and bore sight mode, those are only good out to 10 miles. The radar obviously is making a ruckus farther out, but only within those narrow ranges that it's looking. And now I need to extend my search area if I want to try and find other stuff. We're going to go find this MiG-31 over here. I'm going to select this back to high PRF mode. So I hit that twice, and I know that he's generally in front of me. So I don't want to take the time to scan everything to both sides now. So I'm going to hit a coolie hat left on my throttle, and that brings me into a narrow scan search area. It's just the same search area that TWS mode utilizes, but I'm utilizing it in RWS mode. I do not know exactly how the coding employs it, but sometimes I have better luck spotting a target initially in RWS mode than in TWS mode. And once I know where I'm supposed to be looking, I switch to TWS mode, and then I can keep situational awareness on the target without having to lock him. The advantage to TWS mode is that if you lock a target in TWS mode, we use the slang a soft lock. And so what the radar is doing is it's paying special attention to that while it continues to sweep around. And you get a lock indication on the HUD. The person who has their RWR there, they just keep hearing the normal search indication. So every few seconds they hear beep, beep, because my radar is only glancing at them occasionally, but the radar itself is paying special attention to what's going on. Yeah, Hawks, it's not radar range, it's radar display range. Like I said before, the radar is going way out there. I can now see a big target at 80-something nautical miles out, about 1 o'clock. So it's heading roughly 115 from me. But I can't really do anything with the target that far. I like to stay right around 80. 80 seems to be the happy place for me because fighter-sized targets at or above your altitude tend to show up at about here. somewhere in the 50 to 60, maybe sometimes 65 nautical mile range. It's a coding thing. In real life, it would vary day to day when the radar could perceive those targets. And then also we would have Link 16, and AWACS information would be fed to our awareness display, and we could grab targets from there, and our missiles would go a lot farther. And sorry, off tangent. We're dealing with this simulation, not our expectations. So now that target is inside 80 nautical miles, probably in the 79 nautical mile range. So that's where he's at. I think this 31 is starting to get close, so he's probably in the 50 nautical mile range. And the RWR in both the A-10 and the F-15 does not display an actual range to target. But when it gets about halfway from outside to inside, that means it's within threat range. The A-10 has that inner circle, and if anything gets inside that inner circle, then the RWR thinks it has a chance of hurting you. So it's important to have an idea of roughly how far away those things can hurt you, because then you get the SA. Yes, I am ranting slightly, Rough Rider. We're just bouncing back and forth between everything as context allows. So I still can't find this MiG-31, but I'm scanning at 50 miles from surface to 35,000 feet, and I'm pointing the radar roughly where he should be. So let's look up a little higher now. So I'm scanning from 22,000 to 60. Oh, hey, there's something over there. So I'm going to enter TWS mode. Keep in mind I'm in high pulse rate frequency mode, so I'm looking for targets coming at me. I'm going to hit right and go to medium, and he's gone. His old contacts are displaying, or his old radar contacts are fading out. There's nothing new coming in. So I hit TMS right twice again, and now I'm back in high mode, and each time the radar crosses him, I get a new contact update. So now I'm going to enter TWS mode. Now I've got the target's altitude and his aspect ratio. So that's where he's pointing relative to me. Now I can move my cursor up and TWS up once to soft lock. So he still just sees my radar looking at him occasionally. He doesn't see my radar staring him in the face. And that's good, because the AIM-120C has a data link capability that allows you to launch the missile and it to fly based on your occasional radar glances. Gonna light the wick here. Just getting a little slow. Gas is looking good. So the missile is able to fly to the target based on guidance from the jet, with the radar just taking occasional peeps at the target. That means that the missile can get basically within 10 seconds of impact before the missile has to let him know that it's there. And so if you've ever been hit by an AIM-120 and you only had a few seconds before it hit you, that's why. They're using the capabilities of the aircraft and the missile combined to fire from a long ways away and let the missile get close before the missile's internal radar goes active and enters terminal mode and guides itself the rest of the way in. Chances are, if you're fighting an F-15 and you get a radar warning, you need to be defensive before that. But if not, you immediately need to make defensive moves to try and bleed that missile's energy, and also to defeat the missile. I mean, you just need to turn a little bit harder than it can with the energy it has available, and you'll beat it. So now I'm scanning out to 80. He's inside the halfway point. You can estimate he's about 35. And you can look up here, and this gives you your actual range to target. And that's 32 and decreasing quickly. 39 seconds is going to be your missile time of flight at launch. So it's counting down. It's going to fly for shorter and shorter intervals. 30 miles, it's going to fly for 35 seconds. We're up here approaching the codosphere. To have the least amount of wasted energy when you fire the missile, there's a little dot on here. And if you put that dot in the center of this circle, then that's where the missile is going to try and fly after you launch it. So this missile is actually going to fly out in front of this guy to lead the target, because otherwise, if it chased the target all the way in, it would never have the energy for it. There's two little carrots over here on the right side. Or there's a carrot and two hash marks. You'll see those two hash marks right here. This is your... shit, now I can't remember if it's RMin or RMax. Someone can help me out here. Basically, that's your percentage of kill chances that the computer is estimating you have.
Bingo fuel.
Okay, I've got 6,000 pounds remaining.
Bingo
Pulling
fuel.
back to military power here to conserve some gas. Going to be bleeding airspeed, but such is life. If this is direct head-on shot, these two are going to be really far apart. And when it's a tail-on shot, this is going to be the same mark. They go away, they coincide. So when this carrot gets within the first one, a missile shot will have a chance of hitting. Scat's the guy to ask about the missile stuff and the employment stuff. We're just covering the basics today. You'll notice my scan display range decreased because I'm getting so close. So it automatically jumped down to 40. This number by the carrot is the closure rate. So it's how fast he and I are coming together. If it's head on. Okay, Primus says top hash is RMax. I don't have reason to doubt that. That makes sense, actually. Range max for engagement. I like that. Let's go with that. If you find out otherwise later, don't hold it against me, please. So we're definitely within RMin, or we're not within RMin. We're within the highest PK range. RMin is the least that you can, or the closest that you can shoot. So there's that other little carrot right down there on the bottom. You can fire an AMRAAM to pretty close at the right speeds, but bear in mind it takes a second for the missile to have enough speed for the fins to do anything. Because those fins are tiny, it's got to be going fast to be able to turn. But I'm going to go ahead and fire my AMRAAM here, and it's immediately going to give me a countdown to impact. M3, M2, M1, and splash. Or not. So I might be inside that range already, based on the fact that that missile never hit. I don't know why. We can try a heater. That worked. So apparently I was inside the AIM-120 engagement range for this altitude and this airspeed. The missile did not have time to build enough speed to turn at this altitude because the air is so thin, and so it came off the rail and just... now it's going to fly out and hit Russia somewhere in the mountains. And I'm going to turn my growler off because I'm tired of listening to it. The growling sound is the AIM-120, or the AIM-9 seeker head. Obviously the high tone means, hey, I can see something. Shoot me. I want to go kill it. Yep, that's exactly right. They just didn't have it in them. Or out of them, around them. Excuse me. Oh. I didn't appreciate the size of this engagement area when I built this match. So I'm scanning high PRF, medium to low altitude. I consider 35 medium because above that is definitely Codosphere ranges, and I just changed my weapons, Slick One. If you enter AIM-9 mode, that's DMS right on my bindings that I went through earlier. It selects the AIM-9, and then you get the tone. If you're tired of listening to it, you change weapons. If you don't have a weapon there, it just basically turns off the AIM-9. It cycles to nothing. Of course, when you go to shoot, you won't have anything, so you need to be back on AIM-9 before you go try and shoot. I don't like going slow. Gates. I could use a growler about now. A growler of fat tire, just for nostalgic purposes, sounds good. A lady garden. Not seeing anything in high PRF, so I'll switch low and look around for a while. I prefer to leave the narrow scan area because I can scan a chunk in high and low PRF and then discount it for a while. So right now I'm looking basically at the chunk that is left of me and lower than me out to 40 miles. I'm not looking down, but I'm looking out and down. And I'm looking to the left, and I'm only focusing over on this side over here. So I'm only focusing on this chunk kind of right here. And I can say, okay, there's nothing going away from me here, and I can go back to high mode, and I let it run through the scan a couple times, and there's nothing there. So now I can slew my cursor over to the right. Okay, well, now I'm going to look over in this side. Nothing on high. Switch medium, nothing on medium. Back to high. I want to look higher again. I'm still looking on the right side, but now I'm looking up more. I'm covering kind of this mid-range altitude up to higher altitude in this little chunk now. Hey, Sorbic. Now I'm looking on the left side. Nothing coming at me, bro. So you can kind of start to get a picture of, if you think of medium and high PRF as flashlight colors, and targets going away as color coordinated, we'll say red and blue. You know, if you shine a red flashlight at something red, it's invisible, and same with a blue flashlight at something blue. On that background, you just can't see anything. So if you are in a flanker, then you might consider flying with your radar off, low down in the mountains, and using your IRST, which is just a thermal camera. It's like a targeting pod, but it's specifically designed with symbology to help you find targets, as opposed to the targeting pod in air-to-air mode, which is just you looking for a target on the camera. And that's exactly right, Sorvik. So this A50 is an AWACS. It's always running the radar trying to see things. And it's a very powerful radar. You can see it from a long way away, and it can see you from a very long way away. Your radar is not as powerful as it, so you've got to get much closer to find it. Looks like he's at about 80-something nautical miles out, 70-something, 75 nautical out maybe. Let's do TWS mode. Okay, so he's at 15,000. I'm going to bring him over to the center line on that display, and now he's centered in my HUD. So that's how tall 15,000 feet is at, what's his range? 68 miles away. Well, not invisible. Their radar still has a chance of spotting you. But yeah, if you have someone else who knows where to look for the guys. So, if, for example, if we're doing blue flag operations, and as another example, if Geisick is running intercept operation, if he's doing the TAC-P or JTAC situational updates, he can see on the map radar from other sources and vector you to that target. And you don't have to turn your radar on. You just trust him to know where to tell you to go. And then when you get close, you turn it on, you find the guy real quick, and if you're close enough, you fire the missile. And especially if you found him in TWS, he's like, oh, something just popped up and it looks like it's really close. Well, he's going to start turning, and he's probably going to turn into you. But if you just showed up and soft-locked him and fired a missile, the missile's already inbound and he's turning into it. increases the closure rate a lot and decreases his chance of doing anything about it a lot. So there are definitely times and advantages where leaving the radar off can work, but if you're out lone wolfing it and you're not in a Russian aircraft, like today we're flying the F-15, you don't have an EO or an IRST, whatever you want to use the acronym for, to look for heat signatures. You could turn your Sidewinder tone on and just fly around with this little narrow field of view, and it might pick something up. But the EO is a bigger thing, and it shows multiple heat sources on it. So you can say, hey, I want to select this one, I want to select that one. So in the way of sneakiness and flying down low through the mountains, the Russians have the advantage there right now. I'm still pretty sad that we don't have data link in the F-15. I mean, even data linking to know where our hogs were would be a huge advantage, let alone being able to share target information amongst eagles. Yep. So the A-50 is radiating. You know, his radar is on. He's got that big dish flashlight just sweeping around, and his is more like a fan that sweeps like this all the time, kind of like an air traffic control thing. He's looking, you know, at a cone outwards, and it's going around like this all the time, just circle, circle, circle. Go back to BVR mode, back out to 80. Not seeing him on high PRF now. So I'm going to cycle to low or medium PRF. I always do high and low, and I apologize for that. If I say low PRF, I mean medium PRF. And now I'm not seeing him on there. Medium PRF has a much harder time spotting targets farther away and against ground clutter. So one thing I can do is to try and get a little lower. I don't want to get too low here because I'm going to start burning a lot more gas. It's going to be noisy. I'm going to use the outside view for a second. Yeah, like a lighthouse. That's a good analogy, or a metaphor there, Primus. Well done, sir. So there's the radar. It's just sweeping around. So you hear beep, and then it does its thing, and then you hear beep. It looks like he is flying... this might be a different one that I'm seeing. Well, I've got an A-50 indication, but I'm not finding an A-50. Interesado. We'll go back to high PRF. See what we can do. No, nothing. Well, isn't that just puzzling? It really is. I don't know how I lost this guy and can't find him now. Ruh-roh. Down to 400 pounds in my left tank there. Ike, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I have a feeling you're pretty correct. Ike mentions notching. Notching is when you utilize a limitation in the Doppler radar where if you're flying essentially the same speed or parallel to the aircraft, it can't see you coming or going. So it needs some component of coming, giggity, or going before it can see you on the radar screen. So if you see an F-15 and you turn so that that F-15 indicator is here roughly, or here, if he's far enough away, you'll vanish from his scope. And you can just keep him right on that line until you get closer. You could turn your radar off, and as long as if you're notching correctly, he won't see you anymore, and he won't know really where to look. And it can get interesting quickly. As fast as this guy is turning, I think he's probably pretty close to me. I'm going to switch back to medium PRF. You know what? I'm just going to cheat now, because I'm a little perplexed about what's going on. and I want to understand. So he is really close to me, and he's headed away, so I should be in medium. Oh, I just lost my left engine and my right engine. Both my engines just quit. Cool. You know what? I'm gonna go to VSS mode. I'm gonna look around. Why can't I find this guy? I've gone full herp derp, guys. Oh, there he is. I just wasn't looking low enough. If I get a lock, I can go into guns mode. I get a solution. Altitude. Altitude. So don't try and shoot when you're really far away. Make sure you're actually within the effective range there. Fine. Fox 2. Oh, that's probably going to defeat... Well, maybe not. Just the tip. See, those missiles are being really lazy about making that turn. They just don't have the energy for it. All right. Who wants to go to 104th and see how it works? As herp derp as that radar searching was just now, probably not going to go so well for me. But let's find out. In terms of what the different modes are and what they do, I think that's pretty much all you guys need to know. I think actually I'm just going to go ahead and shut down this part of the stream, and then I'm going to bring it back up as just a regular stream. Sincere thanks for joining us. Thanks to the Wet Bandits for the inspiration and the hosting and help. Thanks to Classy Packs for that freaking awesome intro. I think it's actually about to become an outro too. And you guys take care.